But yeah, thank you so much for taking the time to sit down with us. And I guess
My
probably
pleasure.
the first question, which I think we kind of put out to the community, is like, who's got questions for Brett? And he's a mindset coach, a professional speaker. And I think the most common question that came up was like, what is a mindset coach? Like, what is it exactly that you coach, and what do you do?
Sure. Great question. Yeah. So, I mean, I work with athletes, CEOs, every single person in any wake of life, really. Like anything, when you want to achieve something, whether it's going to the gym to increase your physical performance or learning to learn a new language or whatever it may be, there's always coaching involved. You know, it's not like we just have these skills and we just know how to do them. That's why we have coaches in all aspects. But when it comes to a mindset, now we're talking about the difference between separating emotions and facts, how we choose to view the things in front of us. And it's incredible that every single thing around us will actually impact the way we feel. And for the vast majority of us, we actually make decisions based on how we feel. So whatever it may be, we perceive something in one aspect, triggers a thought, which then triggers an emotion. And all of a sudden we feel a certain way. And then we're going to take action based off of that feeling. And that's why you get a lot of people making emotional based decisions, which generally doesn't lead them to the action that they were, hoping to achieve. So when it comes to mindset coaching, it's really about separating the facts and emotions and really diving deeper in how to become more efficient at whatever it is you want to apply it to.
Yeah, perfect. So I guess let's go down the rabbit hole. And can you give us a little bit of an insight into like how exactly you would do that?
Yeah, absolutely, man. I mean, and the big thing here is that first people need to understand that every single thing that goes through their mind is their thoughts. It's even if I was to say to you, Ben, I want you to think about the color blue, and you think about the color blue, you got to understand that, yes, it may have originated from me, but at the end of the day, you're still thinking the color blue. So it's still your thought.
Yeah.
And as people start to grasp the fact that these thoughts in my head are mine and nobody else's, and based on these thoughts, it's altering how I feel, it's incredible how much more control we actually have once we recognize that. Because I've seen so many people say, oh, I'm just in a bad mood today, or something set me off and I don't know why. And that's generally because of our subconscious mind with the thoughts running in the background, and it's affecting the way we feel. Yeah. So really that fine line of understanding that first, every single thing that goes through your head, the good, the bad, the darkest secrets, the skeletons in the closet, man, like that's all ours as an individual, and we control those. Yeah. So understanding that those are ours first is always the first place to start.
Okay. So I guess mindfulness as well, in general as a term over the last couple of years has become like quite buzzy, right? And I think that there's almost for many that almost reluctance to get started there, and kind of that whole idea of developing self-awareness and being able to kind of like watch your thoughts rather than like be your thoughts. How do you go from like taking it as that kind of buzzword trendy and trying to like take it in and be like, no, it's actually directly applicable to like everything that we do, and just as important as your diet, as your like physical training?
Yeah, sure. And I think one of the first steps that I get anybody that I work with to do is to write down their conscious thoughts. And I'm talking throughout the whole day. So like the first couple of days, they're going to have like notes and notes and notes. And I, as far as I've seen, the vast majority of us don't actually realize what we're thinking. And like, even in this conversation, you're speaking and I'm trying to think about something to, okay, what's the best way for me to answer this? It's actually taking away from the conversation because I'm already thinking like 3 steps ahead.
Yeah.
Right. And that's where that whole, like you said, listening to your thoughts and mindfulness buzzword, like it really is applicable. Right. So the second that we can start to identify the specifics by writing down what we're actually thinking, it opens up like a whole new doorway of what's actually going on in our minds. And by doing so, I think you're going to learn a lot about yourself, not just at a surface level, but you start to see patterns like, hey, I'm actually thinking the same thing over and over, multiple times a day or, multiple times a week. And that could be triggering certain things as to why I feel a certain way. Because again, I can't stress it enough, man, that how we feel is a reflection of our thoughts. It's as simple as that.
Yeah. Yeah. So journaling is I guess, another one of those things that seems to be thrown around a little bit more and more and more. And so that's something that you have all your clients do like daily or like a couple times a week. Yeah, daily.
It's one of the first steps. And this is the opening up to learn about awareness. And it's like, we all know who we are. It's like, oh, I know who I am. I know what I think. Like, this is my brain, this is my body. I know myself best, right?
Yeah.
That's the conscious mind. But that doesn't tell us what's going on in the subconscious mind. Okay. And I kind of like to separate the two. And that's why when you really start to get a better grip on the conscious mind and write things down, your subconscious mind is like, oh, wait a second, this guy's starting to pay attention. And now it's like he's on to us, man. And the more awareness you have in your conscious mind, the more subconscious starts to go into the background and slowly fade away because you're in full control of your thoughts.
Yeah.
Now, when you're in that state, man, that's a totally different ballpark because you're game changing now.
It's kind of like it's always a pleasant conversation to have with someone like yourself, and almost reaffirms, I guess, like what we kind of tend to practice as coaches or as athletes, as individuals as well. And that kind of like being aware of your own self-talk, or like inner monologue, or like whatever you want to call it. I think definitely over the last sort of 18 months, 2 years has probably become to me much more, or I've become more aware of like the importance that that kind of plays, you know, for like all kind of goal achievement, right? And when you have clients that are, say, looking to improve their diet and stuff like that, but inside they're telling themselves like they're not worthy, or they don't deserve it, or they're self-sabotaging, you're really limited into what you're going to be able to do, right?
Yeah, totally, man. You know, it's another word we use is the language that we speak to ourselves.
Yeah.
And it is so powerful, and it's so underrated in so many ways, and it's almost ignored. And I think like we can put this into like a weightlifting aspect, just so you can have some context here.
So
Myself,
just before you get started, so Sharon Co has like given the okay if you want to use her as an example.
oh, awesome, great, perfect. Well, here we'll use a share an example then, and I've seen it, and we've done it all too. Like I've done it myself as well.
Yeah.
So you know, when you start building up to go to a heavy lift, a lot of times you're going to have colored plates, or a lot of times you kind of know when the weight gets heavier and heavier, and it's totally creeping up to your personal best or your personal record. And as that starts to load up, it's like, oh man, you know, let's say my weight was 250 pounds for a clean and jerk, and I'm at 240, like that's borderline my max. Those thoughts already are changing your physiology. They're changing your physical state,
Yeah.
right? And let's say you add 5 pounds, you're 245. In your mind, it's like, yo, that's pretty much it. Like that's like my 95%er. Like I know I don't have much more. That's taking away every single thing you've been working at. Like I said, your overall physical state, how you approach the bar changes. And you've probably seen it as soon as somebody approaches the bar with that mindset, you already know they're going to miss the lift, right? And it's like, even in their mind, it's like, if you're hitting a PR weight, it's like, oh man, this is my PR. Like, I'm not going to hit this weight. Like, I can't hit this weight. Like, man, this is way too heavy for me. Dude, I've only did this once. It was 3 months ago. Like, there's not a chance I'm hitting this. And
yeah, suddenly the technique changes completely from like the lift before. Yeah.
Absolutely, man. Yeah. So, I mean, like I said, I've fallen victim to it. The vast majority of us do, but that's the importance again about it, the language that we speak to ourselves and the self-talk.
Yeah. And so if you are in that moment, and you're on the platform, I guess you'd almost argue, well, it's too late to be trying to start mindfulness practice at that point. But I guess that is essentially like, how would you mimic that skill? Like in training, like how do you train for getting into that moment, looking at your third attempt, it's 2 kilos more than you've ever lifted, and having, I guess, like legitimate or like genuine confidence that you're going to make the lift? Because there's that like fake it till you make it, and there's that bravado, but I don't imagine that really in the moment that either of those things can really come through for you all that often.
Sure. Yeah, those slogans, those lines, fake it till you make it, this thing's driving me crazy, man. And one thing you'll know about me is I refuse to lie to myself to make myself feel better, or lie to any of my athletes to make them feel better. That's never going to happen. And I think it's very important to recognize this. And there's 2 ways we can look at this. First, there's an NLP standpoint, so Neuro-Linguistic Programming. This is basically our repetitions, the things that we've done over and over and over. So when you get up in the morning, you have a certain way that you get out of bed, you get your day started. That's kind of the way you are, but you've been programmed that way, and you do it over and over and over. That's the same thing with weightlifting or going to a heavy bar. You approach the bar the same way. Some people, shake their right arm just a force of habit. They say something to themselves. They have their cues. This is the neuro-linguistic side of it. This is the programming that you've done over and over and over. So the first thing that I have to teach my athletes is to always approach the bar the same. I don't care if it's got 95 pounds on it or it has 250 pounds on it. The weight is irrelevant. Mm. The mindset and how we approach it is all that matters. And if you think about those days when, they're rare, I mean, for me, they're very rare, maybe once or twice a year, where everything kind of works. You know, you go to the gym and everything's just lining up. It's like your day, it's your gym. Everything kind of works.
Yeah.
I teach my athletes to have that mindset at approaching anything that they do. So it's not about, oh, this is close to my PR or this is just me warming up. It's the same. And we're going to build that habit to put themselves in a position to allow their body to perform at their absolute best, their peak performance state. And again, the way we do that is by breaking old habits, by replacing them with new ones. And it all goes back to that awareness piece as well.
Okay. So are you getting almost to a point where you're trying to train yourself to be, I guess, in a flow state more often? Because I think at the moment, like that whether it be like creative flow or like you said, when you go into the gym and the bar just feels like it's popping and everything's easy. And I know for most people, and myself included, like those are pretty far, like few and far between, right? So is that kind of the goal that every time you begin to associate being on the platform with that feeling of like invincibility or whatever it is?
Sure. So yeah. So here's the other side of it: is that state of flow, which is a great book as well, by the way. I mean, yes, it's few and far between, but that state of flow always goes back to, again, our mindset, our overall physiology, our state, which again is a direct connection to what we're thinking.
Yeah.
Now, when it comes to actually applying it, there's multiple ways, NLP being one of them, but really there's a set of tools that we can use for everyday life and specific things in the gym. So for example, let's say we're going to do some, I don't know, the marathon row. Okay. Look back at the games, the marathon row. Yeah. I attempted it. I finished it. Wasn't my desired time, but everybody has that point when they're rowing or they're pulling or they're doing something and their mind is like, yo, dude, you better start slowing down. Like this is starting to hurt. Like you got to slow down. And again, that's that awareness and that subconscious mind. The body is screaming at you. All we feel is the emotion, like the lactic acid's building up, you know, like I'm overheating, I'm redlining. So when you put focus on just that, and you're like, dude, my lats are lighting up, my back's cooked, I'm sore, like this is just getting worse. So the more you think about it, the worse it gets. And that's like anything. But if we were to change our focus and start thinking about something more specific, as in, let's replenish our lungs. So instead of me focusing on my quads burning up, my back cooked, I'm going to focus on something specific, being my lungs. So let's count to 3 as I'm rowing. 1, 2, 3, breathe in, inhale, right? Exhale, slow. And I would actually visualize my lungs expanding. And the reason why you need to visualize this is so it takes your conscious mind off of the emotional pain that your body's feeling, and it puts the lungs in the front of the mind. So this is a technique that I use called primary. Now, the best part about this is that you're actually doing something to help your body by regenerating oxygen. You're going to recycle in the blood. You're going to feel a lot better. And it actually takes your mind away from the pain. And it may have happened to many athletes and many people that they're in the middle of the gym and they feel like they're just cooked. And all of a sudden, their mind kind of wanders away from that feeling of being cooked. And they're all of a sudden when they come back, they feel way better than they did before. Mm-hmm. That's because of that disruption. So there's a lot of different tools that we can apply. And it has to do with always a conscious action to which tool you need to apply at what time. So it's not really necessarily always a state of flow and just be with one. It's about you telling your mind to tell your body what it needs to do.
Yeah. It is funny on a subconscious level. Like I know, when say for the opening, for an example, when, you know, there's a little bit of heightened anxiety right before the announcement, you know, gets made and the workout is kind of given to the community. But when there's certain movements that come up and you're just like, yeah, I'm going to crush it. Right. Or the complete opposite. Right. And I think that's, for me, that's been like a big challenge, is try to be like, okay, well, every time a row comes up and I get that feeling like I'm going to smash this workout, like, I want to get to that point where it's like, it doesn't matter what comes up. Like, I still know that, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that's, I guess that's the super hard part of what you've been talking about in that kind of awareness of that subconscious mind, is sometimes those thoughts, whether they're positive or negative, they occur quickly before you even realize they're coming.
Sure, right? Man. Yeah, sure. And that's, again, that's why I said that awareness is so important. And, you know, it's funny, this point about, you just want this part, you're going to crush this part of the workout. And I think to some of my athletes that have been in the state or in the room in the CrossFit Games when they're about to announce a workout, and you can tell right away when they announce a workout, whether it's in someone's wheelhouse or not. You can tell just by their demeanor and everything.
Yeah.
And I used an example where there was one time there was an athlete that was super powerful, huge deadlift. Okay, huge deadlift. And that's not my jam. They announced a workout, heavy deads. and I look over them and they're pumped, like amped up, right? And I'm competing against them, and now I'm destroyed. I'm like, dude, there's no chance in, like, this is just not going to happen. Like, I can only lift so much. So my demeanor changes. Now we're letting external variables also impact us and make it feel like we're worse off.
Yeah.
The important thing is that this can happen in both ways. So let's say, even if I'm not good at deadlifts, okay, they announced deadlifts. Emily Rolfe said this once. They're at the 2019 CrossFit Games. They were like, how's the heat? Like, is it affecting you guys? And she was saying, you know what? It doesn't affect me because we have to do the work anyways. So if I sit here and have to stress about the heat and I have to stress about everybody else around me, what they're going to do, then I know it's only going to take away what I have to do.
Yeah.
So no matter what, I have to do the deadlifts anyways. So I might as well put my mind in the best possible state for me to allow my body to perform at its best level.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a quote from Jason Khalipa, I think, when he's doing the burn workout. I think it was 2014. He's flipping the pig down the field, right?
Yeah.
And he's like miles ahead and he's looking around. He's like, I know if I'm struggling with this, everybody is struggling with this, right? And I think that ability to, you know, realize, like, because it's initially panic, right? Like when you're in a workout and it starts to hurt, it's like, oh my God, maybe I'm not fit. Maybe I'm not strong. Like I'm like way in over my head. Maybe I've gone out too hard. I didn't drink enough water beforehand. Maybe I haven't eaten properly before the workout, like all those things. But to be able to step back and be like, I'm so confident in my ability that I know if I'm struggling with this, that everyone must be struggling with this. And then he goes on to win the event, right?
Totally, man. Yeah, there's another thing that another tool that I talk about is something that I refer to as thought action. And so let's say we're flipping this pig down the field, and all of a sudden it starts to really catch in. It starts to hurt. It's like going back to your cues. Okay, breathe, squat, tight, brace, lift.
Yeah.
Again, keeping that thought action in the front of your mind, telling your body what it needs to do. Well, I'm not saying it's going to make the pain go away. The pain's going to be there. Like, it doesn't just vanish, but it allows your mind to focus on something other than the pain, which will disrupt it for a moment to allow you to get back and take control.
Yeah. I'm interested to hear your thoughts as well, I guess, if we go back from the actual event or whatever it is that people are looking to do, and start with that whole initial like goal setting process. Do you think that there is a danger in the fact that, and if we kind of look more towards like general population, I guess, than like elite competitive athlete, of people either like looking too far ahead when they set goals or setting unrealistic goals? How much of that, like trying to correct the mindset before even starting down the path, do you tend to focus on?
Oh yeah, that's a great question, and it's very important. Let's look at the vast majority of us, and there's a lot of people that come New Year, everybody signs up for the gym, they're ready to go.
Yeah.
You get that influx of people, and they say, you know what, this is gonna be the year. This is what I want to do. This is what I want to achieve, or whatever it may be. And as we know, a few weeks later, the attendance in the gym starts to deplete. And especially in today's day and age, there's almost a preconceived notion of what society expects us to be like. So when we're sitting here comparing ourselves to what it should be like, and after 2 weeks of me dying in the gym, I'm not there, it's extremely demotivating.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very, very important. I have no problem with setting a big goal, even if it's unrealistic. Okay. I like big goals, but the importance about goal setting is the milestones along the way. And as you know, especially with nutrition and training in the gym, sure, you may step on the scale in 2 or 3 weeks and it might be the exact same. It could even be more. But the difference here is that the body composition is changing.
Yep.
Right. Things change that you can't necessarily put an eye to, and you can't see that. And this is the important thing about measuring things daily. Even if you were to say, again, let's say you're working out for a couple of weeks and you've increased your deadlift by 10 pounds, or even you could go on the elliptical for 5 more minutes. It doesn't matter how big or how grand it is. If you don't write that down and you can't measure it, then the results are invisible to you. All you see is what you're exposed to look like, and you look at yourself in the mirror and you're not there.
Yeah.
So that measure piece is absolutely crucial.
Yeah. How dangerous is motivation? Like, and just in terms of the fact that, you know, it's so fleeting. Like on the 1st of Jan, like, yeah, everyone's got all the best intentions, right? But I think we do get into the trap sometimes of, if it's not the 1st of Jan, there's always a reason why it's not the perfect time to start, and that almost waiting for like motivation to occur, right?
Sure.
But I guess there's an element of like action creating motivation, right? And that's just, I guess, rewiring like what you associate your motivation as being.
You got it. You hit the nail on the head. And to me, motivation comes and goes. Okay.
Yeah. Well, it's
Uh,
everyone. Right?
yeah, absolutely. But there's one thing that's more important to me than motivation, and it's purpose. So it's not necessarily about how motivated you feel is today and whatever your reasons are. It's more so about what is attached to it. So what's going to happen if you don't go to the gym?
Mhm.
Okay. Same things happen to people, they come to me and they say, Brett, I don't know what it is that I necessarily want to do. And that's fair. People change direction of their careers all the time.
Yeah.
People make different decisions all the time. Things change. Even if you don't know what you want, I can guarantee you everybody knows what they don't want.
Mhm.
So if we start focusing on what you don't want and then applying certain aspects to that to your life today, what the opposite of what's going to push you away from what you don't want, it's going to help you give purpose to the things that you are doing to get you away from that state. And that's the same thing with motivation. And I had a very close conversation with somebody in my family in regards to exercising and living a healthier lifestyle. And sometimes you got to use a little sensitive words to open their eyes. And I said, I want to have kids one day, and I want you to be around here to be able to see my kids. And all of a sudden, it's just like that click. Like, okay, now hold on a second. There's a new added layer of real purpose, not necessarily motivation.
Yeah.
And once you identify that purpose, when you focus on it and then apply it with measurable results, that's when you can see some serious change.
James Clear talks a lot about like the different levels of like consciousness, and talks about the more that you can attach your identity based on like the goal that you have, or the like, I guess its purpose is the same thing, right? Like the more likelihood that you'll just continue that style of behavior because you identify yourself as a person who does these things, right?
Totally.
Regardless or not of whether you're as fit as you want to be or as strong as you want to be. The fact that it becomes part of your identity, it's like you continue to make choices that align with who you think yourself to be, right?
It goes back to the aligning things that you do every single day with your core values as who you are as an individual.
Yeah.
Like that alignment piece is crucial.
Yeah. And so from a practical point of view, is like, do you encourage your clients to write down like, okay, this is what I want my purpose to be, or this is the kind of person that I want to work towards being. And like, I guess reviewing that like they would their journaling, and just like constantly reminding themselves until it sinks in. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And again, I think that everybody has a very good idea of who they are. Like people know who they are as individuals in this state.
Yeah.
But when you start to peel back these layers with that awareness, things change. And maybe there's things that pop up that you kind of been burying for a long time and you didn't really realize you're burying it. And that's what's causing you to do certain things. As these things get addressed, it's very important to identify them. And identification and application is crucial. So I get the big thing for me is when I work with athletes or people, it's about understanding who they truly are at the core, why it is that they do what they do, and how do we align that with their values and their goal or whatever they're trying to achieve.
Yeah.
But it's not something that we can just set and say, hey, we're going to get to this point. Like you got to reverse engineer things to make sure there's steps along the way.
It's interesting that you say that you feel like most people like know who they are. Like I would almost argue like the opposite. I would almost believe that like there's a reluctance to peel back the layers and kind of self-examine, because people aren't necessarily so convinced that maybe they're going to like what the kind of the answers
Oh,
and
yeah.
stuff that come up
Yeah, no. And I agree with your point. When I say I have a good understanding of why I believe that people know who they are, okay, and that includes us covering up the skeletons in the closet. That includes us, there, man. Tim Grover wrote a book called Relentless.
with.
Okay, this is one of my favorite books.
Yeah. This is recommended reading for every new client.
This is yes, absolutely. This is definitely on the repertoire and the agenda. But he talks about things, and he's like, I want you to think about the things that you don't want people to know. Like think about the things that go through your mind every single day. And when you think about these things, like there's stuff that goes through my mind that if somebody got in my brain for a minute, they'd be like, wow, this guy's crazy. But we're all like that, right? We all have the thoughts that go through our mind. And this is why I know exactly who we are, what we're thinking. But as we start to address certain things, and like I said, working with a coach to peel back these layers, to get those skeletons out of the closet, and to uncover certain things, all of a sudden things start to change. And that's where your point comes in, where I believe a lot of people have been burying stuff because they don't want to face reality.
Yeah.
And when it comes to mindset coaching and mental coaching, we dive extremely deep into that. And it's everybody makes decisions, and they make these decisions based on who they are and what they believe, their values.
Yeah.
But those values may be covering up some garbage, man, and some bad stuff. And that's why they keep making bad decisions. So we need to uncover those things so we can figure out what's going on from the root cause and then make better decisions based on that.
Do you think something like self-sabotage is an element of that, right?
100%, man.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It happens, and it happens a lot more than I think that the vast majority of people think.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's probably the kind of the biggest, biggest appeal of having a coach, whether it be mindset or nutrition or even like a PT, like a trainer, is that you kind of have a guide to like step you through that, right? Like you have someone there that's like, okay, like I'm here to catch you. Like when you fall, that's fine. Like that's part of the process, you know?
Yeah.
It is, I think that kind of self-examination, like it is terrifying, you know, and if you do uncover things that you don't like and you don't know what to do with it, like, then you're really fucked. You know what I mean? Like, what do you do at that point? You know?
Dude, you know, it's check this out. So I had a boss once who was helping me with communication. He was a great communication expert. And he said, Brett, before you send an email, read it out loud. So in my mind, I type out this email. It looks great. The second I started reading it out loud, the whole email changed. I was like, man, I sound condescending or whatever it may be, right? And that's the same thing that goes with our thoughts. So when we think things in our mind, they think fine. But as soon as we say them out loud, sometimes it's like, well, that didn't come out right, or that's not what I meant. And having a coach to help peel back these layers and mirror what you said, wow, man, like that mirroring and repeating back, it's almost like a punch in the face sometimes. And
yeah. Do you think that's like part of the issue, I guess, with technology too, right? Especially with communication, that so much is lost when it's written in email or like sent in a text message, right?
Totally. And yeah, and I think that and this is coming from some professionals that I know that are communication coaches, our level of communication as humans is decreasing daily. You know, it's definitely changing, man.
I heard a quote the other day that emojis are like hieroglyphics of the 21st century. So
Oh, man.
can you imagine in like 1,000 years and they start looking at all these emoji messages?
Like, what is this?
Okay, cool. I think the other big one that I want to chat a little bit about too is like procrastination. Like, you know, I feel like we're kind of getting to it, but like how does someone, you know, on day one or whatever, how do you start to circumvent, I guess, like those disruptions to a new routine or to, you know, when motivation is high and you get to that first 3 weeks and all of a sudden there's no novelty anymore, you're starting to get a little bit sore, a little bit tired, you're not seeing like those kind of instant feedback. Like how do you, you know, and you mentioned it as well, and for anyone that hasn't seen the TED Talk, I'll put a link in the description for the podcast too, but you talk about like that waking up and like, yeah, I'm going to go to the gym. And then you walk past the couch and like, you're like, oh, maybe I'll just like sit down and crank out just one episode of Netflix before I go to the gym. And like, how do we get around procrastination? Is it needing to be like self-disciplined in the early stages of putting in a new habit? Or is there anything more that we can, you know, is it putting blinders on and being like, I'm going to the gym?
Yeah, no, this is great. And I think a lot does go back to purpose, which we spoke about, because as we know, motivation comes and goes. And there's days when, you know, you're beat up, you're tired, you don't feel like going to the gym and you'd rather watch Netflix. Like those days happen. Right. Yep. And I think that us being aware that those days are going to happen, but going back to the purpose as to why we started, what we're doing this for, all that kind of stuff is definitely important. But to reference what I talk about in my TED Talk is there's 3 types. There's things that we want to do. There's things that we have to do, which is my key one. And there's things that we like to do, right? Or I would like to do this, or I need to do this, or I want to do this. But when we have to do something, like there's no other choice. Like no ifs, ands, or buts. Like, man, if I don't go to the gym today, the world's going to end. You're going to see me in the gym, right? It's the incredible thing about humans. And I just saw this documentary the other day, and they're basically talking about BP, the big oil company, saying that there's 50 some odd years left of oil in the earth. Okay. And he says that the amazing thing about humans is that if we had an endless supply of oil, we'd probably still be making gas cars for a long time. Sure, there'd be great guys like Elon Musk who reinvent the wheel and so forth. But at some point, we're going to have to stop making gasoline cars and move to a whole new source. Like we have no choice, right? That's the great part about humans, is when we have no other choice, no other options at all, it leaves us with one thing. So in my TED talk, I say that great people in the world have done tremendous things. Those people are that you see rise to the top, the people that stand out. A lot of times they've faced huge tragedy or huge adversity in life, and they've overcome it because they've had no other choice. Um, the difference between us and them, though, is that we don't necessarily need tragedy to push us to the place to get our butts in gear and go, because the mind doesn't know the difference between reality, what's actually happening, what we see, versus what we construct, what we tell ourselves every single day, those conversations that we have in our head.
Yeah.
And this is very important, because if we control our thoughts, like I said, we control our mindset, we control how we feel, we control everything. So we can actually proactively put ourselves into that have to state, when the back's against the wall and you push off proactively. And in that type of a state, think about what you're able to accomplish. It's almost like,
It's a deadline,
man,
right? When you got a
yeah,
deadline,
exactly.
like how
You
much
got a
more?
deadline, you got an assignment due tomorrow morning. It's 11 o'clock at night. You've been pushing it off nonstop.
Weeks.
You have no choice. I need to do this assignment, right?
Yeah.
You could have proactively done that a week in advance. But the difference is, at some point, you didn't make the choice to do it. You
Yeah.
put it off, right? The reason why you had to do it at that last minute is because there's a deadline. You had to do it, right? But man, I'm telling you, by proactively putting your mind in the state to cut off all their decisions, you can put yourself in that state and get it done. But that's a choice that people need to choose to make, and that's on them, nobody else, man.
Do you think that that's a decision that gets harder the more you are, for instance, if you have a family, young kids, a partner, and you decide I know for example, like with us having a kid, like all of a sudden, like my lofty goal of like getting to a 250 kilo deadlift, it's like, does that really matter so much now that like there's other priorities and things on the table? And so I guess like how do you get to that point when maybe you are a mother of a young family, and maybe like your partner's not like as super into like working out as you are, and obviously the kids are gonna like, how do you keep that motivation to like making that the gym is just something that I have to do when you have all these other drivers that need time and attention?
Totally, man. And this is good. This is good for us to understand that, first, no matter what, stuff's going to come up, man.
Yeah.
Things are going to change, deadlines, work going to call, like whatever, man. Things happen. Okay. But stop being so, I'm going to use the word like naive or blind to it, or scapegoating it. I can't go to the gym because of this, or this just popped up, so it's throwing my whole day for a whack. Dude, listen, things are going to come up, right?
Yeah.
And if we know that things are going to come up, it almost puts us into a better state because we're expecting it. No, I'm not sitting here and saying just think about the negative. Okay. I'm just saying be open to the idea that things could change and you might have to make adjustments along the way. But the second you start scapegoating it, dude, that's that self-inflicted pain, self-sabotage. That's the stuff that I have zero sympathy for. Like, if you said that you wanted to do something or you had to do something and it's truly that important, you'll make the damn time, even if something pops up. Like, you want to hit your huge PR, man, I promise you, if it was that important to you, you'd find a way.
Yeah.
Right. And that's again where you got to have that give and take. So all of a sudden things in life change. Maybe it's not that important, but I guarantee you there's probably something else that is that important that will take its place.
Yeah.
That's very important for a perspective standpoint.
How often does tough love come into it? Like, how often are you just like giving like looks to clients being like, come on?
Oh yeah, man. This is something that Sharon and I can talk about. Emily and I can talk about a ton, man. Like, dude, I'll use Emily for example. She was putting weight on the bar, and her coach added an extra 5 pounds on the bar. And the look on her face was like, come on. And then all she did was look over at me, and dude, like, we're never supposed to recognize what's going on with the bar, right? So just the look on my face, she realized, like, I'm in trouble, like serious trouble, man. That tough love happens, but it's almost like a reminder, right? Think about, I don't know, you tweak something in your back, you go to the chiropractor or massage therapy. So, you go for the first time, you go 3-4 days a week. The next week, maybe you only go 2-3 days a week. The week after, once. You progressively start to get better. That's the same thing with tough love. And the first couple of weeks of going through mental training and mindset training, listen, man, I'm glad I'm the coach sometimes. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Yeah. why do we find it so hard to take our own advice? Like even as coaches, like why is it sometimes it's so easy to like give advice? It's gonna be like so
This is
hard.
so good. This is so good. This is actually something that comes up really often. So imagine, let's think about you're in the stands and you're watching a sporting event. You're watching hockey, right? And you can kind of see the play develop, okay? And you can see, because you can see the whole arena. You can see all the players. You can see the guy moving, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, dude, I know he's going to pass it right through the slot. Like you can see it developing, right? So it's very easy for us on the outside to identify exactly what's going on.
Yeah.
There's no emotions involved. It's very clear. We can see things clear as day. So I can give you great advice. Here's the great advice I can give you because it's clear to me. But the reason why we can't give ourselves our own advice or take our own advice is because now we're dealing with our own emotions.
Yeah.
And this is the thing where emotions cloud our judgment, man. When we're emotional, I mean, we've all fallen victim to our own emotions. Like I said, like imagine a time where we probably responded to a text with a bunch of capitals and we're like blasting it. And you're like, man, I probably shouldn't send this text message. And your thumb's like, oh yeah, boop. And it still sends. And you're like, uh-oh. Or spouted something back. And then again, that's because emotions come like a tidal wave, man. And they take over everything. And that's why it's hard for us to take on our advice because, denial, or we don't want to admit certain things, or we got those skeletons, or we think we're just so perfect. I mean, let me tell you right now, just ask my ex-girlfriends, man. Okay. I'm not perfect, but in many times in my argument, I sure as hell thought I was, right?
Yeah.
That's
you might be perfect, but you were sure as hell right.
You know it, man. Yeah, you know it. Yeah, for sure.
Emotions, I guess, are an interesting one too, right? Because I don't necessarily think that the goal should be to like completely detach and kind of like try not to, like, I think there's a degree of, I don't know if responsibility is the right word, but to again, try to feel the emotions, but maybe try to separate from like feeling them and understanding why you're feeling them rather than acting on them. But the goal isn't necessarily like just to be completely like emotionless, right?
Like a sociopath? No, that's absolutely not the goal. No. Here's the thing is that emotions are the most powerful thing we possess as humans, man. Okay. Like, dude, this is what makes us who we are.
Yeah.
Working with a mindset coach and what I do with my athletes is get them to use their emotions as leverage instead of their emotions controlling them. And that's why I say that there's times when we've fallen victim to our own emotions and it's probably left us in a bad place, right? But if you can use that emotion to your advantage, for example, think about these stories where you hear about mothers like lifting up a car to save their baby or doing like incredible things, rush of adrenaline, emotions are involved. Dude, that's how we proactively train our athletes when they step on the platform. Like you see Tia Claire Toomey stomp her right foot twice. This is her flicking a switch, using her emotions to her advantage to put her body in the best state possible. Yeah. So I need to make it clear. It's not about becoming a sociopath and having no emotions. No. It's about taking control of your emotions. And the way you do this is strictly by the language that you speak to yourself. Yeah.
And that's kind of to do with like arousal and stuff too, right?
Sure, man. Yeah, of course. It applies to anything. And I have a sequence that I'll share. So I believe, like I said, the vast majority of people, they think something, okay? And then that thought triggers emotions. And then people take action off of those emotions, which gives them a result. Okay. So you think something triggers an emotion, you take action based on that emotion. And when you do that, generally it leaves us with an undesirable result. When I train my athletes is to, when you think something, your conscious thought, you take immediate action on what it is that you want to achieve. That action will give you a desirable result. And then when the result is there, you hit your PR, you successfully hit a lift, then you can embark in the emotion, and all that does is reinstill your initial thought. So it's like a sequence, man.
Yeah. I think it's like applying that and even thinking back to like journaling. Like sometimes I'm not a massive journaler, and it's like something that I've been thinking like probably should be worth getting back into it, even if it's just like a couple of minutes. But it is funny how often you will like, even if you read like you said with ex-girlfriends, like past conversations on like text message, and you look at like what you're saying now and you're like, why did how was I so invested in that? Like, why did I care so much? Like, yeah,
that attachment, man. And that goes back to those values of who we are. You know, everybody has this unique identity. And I know we know who we are, but when you look back and reflect when you're removed, it's like seeing the hockey game develop and you can see it clear as day. Like, what was I thinking, man? Or what was happening? And that's emotions, bro.
Yeah. 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 It's, I mean, but I think like you're right. Like the problem is, I guess, essentially the same thing can be used for so much good or like so much the opposite too, right? And that's, I guess, what
Totally.
self-awareness is trying to differentiate between the two and how to then go from that point. So,
Yeah, man. Yeah, that like that's what I said, and I've said it so many times that the language we speak to ourselves, the words that we say, they have a bigger impact than you think.
yeah,
And Tony Robbins, he says this so well, man. He says, you want to talk about self affirmations, that's fine, but don't rely on them. And he uses an example, and of course I can relate to this example because I'm Italian. So obviously I have a garden and it's got tomatoes in it, right?
yeah,
And he's like, here's the problem with self affirmations. He's like, you're gonna walk outside, see your garden, and see there's weeds there, right? So if you close your eyes and be like, "Okay, there's no weeds, there's no weeds, there's no weeds," and then you open your eyes, bro, there's still weeds, right? So he says this line. He says it's very important for us to look at things as they are, but not worse than they are.
yeah,
And we're wired as a species, like our amygdala is wired 75% from a survival instinct, which is generally for us to look at things from a negative standpoint. I get it. It's who we are as humans, but that doesn't mean that we don't ultimately have control. Yes, it's who we are, but how we choose to perceive it is still up to us. And when you learn to take control and to look at things from a different perspective, it's going to change the way you feel. And
yeah.
when you change the way you feel, like when you make a logical decision, not an emotional decision, the outcome is going to be substantially different.
Yeah. And that's like choosing gratitude and like all those kind of different elements too, right?
Sure, man. Yeah. And I think it's very important. And I said it earlier that I don't believe ever to lie to yourself, right? Sure, choose gratitude. There's a lot of great things. But the big thing, man, is just remember that you have a choice. And the choice is on you how you want to see the world in front of you. It's nobody else's job to make you happy. It's your own job. And it
Yeah.
always goes back to our thoughts. And that's so crucial.
Yeah. For someone who is listening to this and they're like, okay, today is like my day one of like my mindfulness journey. Is it as simple as just like trying to like listen to what you're thinking and stopping and correcting like some of the negative thoughts that come through? Like what's the strategy to get started? If it's your day one, like where can people sort of start right at the beginning?
Sure, sure. I'll give you some surface level stuff. So it's not about necessarily correcting it. Okay. First things first, we need to identify it. So it
Yeah.
doesn't mean we need to correct it right away, but it's us becoming more aware. And that's why I said that you'll see a lot of patterns as you start to write down the things that you're thinking and you're going through this. You might see some standout things. And then when you see the connection between them, I guarantee you, when you think those things, they're changing the way you feel. So what I would suggest is take note of your conscious thoughts. The more you do so after a couple days, and I'm not just saying do it for day one and then stop. Like if you really want to make a change, you got to commit, right?
Yeah, you don't
So
just track
put
your
in,
food for one day, right?
yeah, you can't exactly. It's just not going to work, right? If you really want to do it, do it. Like my old man used to tell me when I was a kid. He said, "Brett, if you're going to do anything in life, do it 100%, and don't bother doing it all." And listen, my old man, he's a short, old school Italian guy named Dino with like big mitts, bro. Like, but the guy was like 5'3". Okay. But man, this is the guy that you don't want to run across the wrong way. And I'll tell you a quick side note. Sorry. I'm 11 or 12 years old. Of course, he was obviously my soccer coach. I played soccer. It's typical Italian. And I was always defense. And of course, I never scored a goal. And man, I had this opening one day and we were up 2-0. And I literally had this wide open opening and I went for it. Like went end to end. Okay. And it was like, it should have been on like ESPN or something. Like that's in my mind, right? Deking through everybody and I score my first goal. Like my whole team picks me up. I mean, they didn't, but in my mind they do, right?
Yeah.
So I score my first goal and I'm pumped and I look back at my old man who's my hero and he's pissed. Like, dude, he is livid. The first thing that comes out of his mouth is substitution and he benches me. Like, dude, I'm 11 years old, score my first goal and my dad benches me. And this is where my dad, like I told you, old school Italian. I wish my mom was there because she's the loving, oh, my little baby, still calls me that, good balance. But I'm like, man, what the heck is going on? And he says to me, listen, if you're too busy trying to play somebody else's position, how are you going to play your own? And I didn't really understand it at the time. And I mean, over the years I've gotten it. And it's the same thing when I say that if you're going to do something, you really want to make a change, put yourself in the have to state and decide to do it. Okay. So sorry we diversed, but to go back.
That's what this podcast is all about. Tangents.
Yeah, diversity.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you start taking notes, you're going to see some standout things that are going to trigger certain emotions. Okay. So for example, you may be feeling a certain way multiple times a day, and you're going to see those connections. It's very important to identify those connections. Put a star beside them. Write down how they make you feel. Okay. Instead of giving yourself an affirmation, when you write down what you feel, I want you to find the advantage in that feeling. So for example, if it's me for lifting, I'm finding myself multiple times a day being scared about lifting a 1RM, okay, or going after some new personal best. If my advantage would be like, look, I know it's inevitable. Like Emily Rolfe said, I have to do the work anyways. I know it's important to me. I want to do it. So every time I approach that bar, whether it's a good lift or a bad lift, I know I'm getting stronger, right? That's that measurable result. So find the advantage. And when you find the advantage in everything in life, even the negative, man, life starts to change. All of a sudden, it's like you're taking control, and now you have an application, and everything you're doing is bettering you to become a better version of yourself.
It's like
That's where you can.
you win or you learn, basically, right?
Exactly, man. Exactly. Again, I don't want anybody to lie to themselves. I want you to truly find the real advantage and apply it to it. Okay. This is the first kind of surface level stuff. And I think people will be amazed of how many opportunities they can find to become better. And when you start to write down these opportunities and start to apply them to life, you're really going to overall start to change your conscious thoughts, how you choose to look at things, and you're going to build a new habit. And I think that is so crucial. In NLP, it's referred to as an anchor. Again, like I said, when you get up every morning, everybody has their own routine. They brush their teeth first, whatever it may be, right? When you start to apply these, finding the advantages, it doesn't matter what happens. If they announce a workout and it's not in my wheelhouse, I instantly find the advantage, and I'm going to put my mind in a better state.
Yeah.
Chances are I'm going to perform a heck of a lot better.
Yeah. Yeah. We talk to our clients a lot about like, each week, like, I want you to tell me your 3 biggest wins of the week. Right. And I think it's probably a technique that we use a lot more when clients are struggling. And it's the same sort of thing. It's like, you always had wins. Like, did you get through the week as shit as it was? Perfect. Like we're on the board, and that each day is kind of that opportunity to start again. And I think probably that's an important part of it too, is like, it's not fail. It's just like, get back on the wagon as quickly as you can.
Totally,
Right.
man. It's inevitable, man. That adversity is going to strike.
Yeah.
Okay. Nothing is ever going to be perfect. Like there's no such thing. And you wouldn't want it that way. You got to look at it as an opportunity to get better. And I think when people really start to build that habit of failing, and failing is different than failure. Failing is learning, as you will say, right? Failure is you've given up. So the more you fail, the better you're going to become, man.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. I think it's true. It's just get back to it, get back to it. Like, fall down 8 times, get up 9, right?
Yeah, man. That's where like the purpose comes into perspective. Why are you doing this to start with? Commit to it, do it 100%. If you really want to change something, do it. You have to do it. All these things compound and they all add up to getting your ass to work, man.
Yeah. I think I'm just kind of looking through as well. I've got the questions written down here that we've been kind of prompted to ask. And I think really the only one that we haven't kind of gotten to is, if someone is working on their mental toughness or resilience or whatever it is you want to call it, what can they use, I guess, as metrics for like identifying progress, or like what can they sort of use as like measurable metrics when it comes to mindset?
This is a great question. I mean, and that's the thing. Is nutrition, you can measure your macros. With training, you can measure your body weight and body fat. With your mind, you can't really measure it, man. And that's the important thing here. Yeah, it's like, dude, this thing doesn't shut off. And that's one thing with a mental coach. It's so much different than a personal trainer. Personal trainer, you train you for an hour a day and then you're done. But dude, the mind doesn't stop, right?
Yeah.
So one thing that I would say to people is very important is to identify those key things, how you're choosing to view things from the very get-go. So let's say we start with a journal. Like I said, we're going to write down our thoughts. We're going to write down how they make us feel. We're going to find the advantage. As you continue to progress through this advantage, it's very important to look back to where you were. Same way you said, I look back at these past conversations and I'm like, what was I doing? What was I thinking? Right? The more data that we can put down, the more measurable we can make it.
Yeah.
The clearer we can see the connections. The other thing I like to do is when we're actually physically making these notes, there's times where I'll get my athletes to write down exactly how they're feeling, like really how they're feeling. I don't care about the skeletons, man. That's your reading. You write down some scary stuff. I don't care, but be honest,
Mm.
right? And you'll start to see a change. Like I said, man, when you choose to view certain things to your advantage and you know it's only going to make you better, and you're trying to do this because of your purpose and you're in the have to state, bro, I promise you results are going to come. It's very important. You'll see it.
Do you have any prompting questions? Like if I'm sitting down tonight, I'm like, all right, I'm going to journal. Like where do I start? Like what, do you have like any kind of like prompts? Is it as,
Okay. Yeah.
what
So,
are you,
so the,
like, what are you thinking right now? Like, is that like start at the top and work your way back, or?
okay. So my approach is a little bit different. And whether you want to do it on your phone or you want to carry a notepad, what I would suggest is throughout the day, I wouldn't dedicate a certain X amount of time to do it. Throughout the day, constantly, anything that's consciously pops into your mind that, not aside from, I got to walk the dog or I got to get milk, but something consciously pops into your mind that triggers an emotion, I would get them to write that down.
Okay.
That is the crucial part. And that's where I said that you're going to start seeing these certain thoughts that start to stand out. It's like if I was to ask you to go back and, rehearse or recite the entire day that you had yesterday, maybe like, well, I got up, did a few things around the house, worked on the podcast, that was that. But that doesn't tell me how you felt.
Yeah.
That doesn't tell me enough details. Even if you were to journal it at the end of the day, you're journaling it off of the state that you're in right now. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Not at
And
the
that's
time, right? It's a
exactly,
recount more than it's in a, yeah.
exactly. That's super important. That's why I suggest to do it throughout, not just sitting down at a block time saying go. This way it's a lot easier as well, because it's not like, oh man, I got to do that 2 hours of journaling at the end of the night. Like, forget it.
Yeah.
I would suggest constantly do it throughout the day.
All right. Perfect. Any resources, apps, books? You mentioned Tim Grover's Relentless, State of Flow. Anything else like that you recommend?
Yeah, it really depends on what people are after. There's a tremendous amount of books. I would just suggest to anybody to get out there and read. Like, you got mentors everywhere, man. People say, "Oh, I don't have a mentor. I don't have the money." Listen, $20, spend it on a book. You're gonna learn something.
14 on Audible.
There you go, man. And I mean, Audible's amazing, and a great book. Of course, Relentless. I highly recommend it. It's part of my program. Is David Goggins wrote a book called "Can't Hurt Me." Listen, man. I mean, that guy's in a league of his own, man.
Oh, incredible.
Yeah, he is. But it's amazing. I love talking to clients about him because he's living proof that your mind is so much stronger than we think. And it also allows us to put our body into a place where it's way stronger. As you know, he's got the 40% rule.
Yeah. But I don't know. With Goggins, I almost feel like, not that he's a sociopath, but like, he's also someone who he is too David Goggins to his own detriment, where like he can't balance relationships and kind of like anything that's outside like that world of just like constant suffering, right?
Sure.
So even with someone like Goggins, I still feel like what a great example of like one end of the spectrum, but there's still someone there who like needs a lot of work,
Totally, man. It's crazy. So you think about somebody like him on the one end of the spectrum, and you think about it on the flip side, like somebody like Wim Hof.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, this guy is the yoga, the breathing, the Iceman. Like
the Iceman for everyone listening. Yeah.
Yeah. But both guys, sure, are on the ends of the spectrum, but they're both doing something very similar, and they believe in something, and that's pushing their mind to places that they've never been. Yeah. But man, that's his jam. That's what he likes to do. Right. And like I said before, it's nobody's job to make you happy. And if he's choosing to do this, so clearly he likes it, whether he's a sociopath or not, that's his choice. And you got to live with it. It's the other thing is that the choices that we made, man, you got to accept them. Like, that's who we are. We've made these decisions, right? He continues to make them and defy all odds. And same thing with Wim Hof. It's remarkable, man. Yeah. Hats off to these guys.
I think it's super important that people like this still exist within the community, because like they're setting a bar, right? And that bar is like, you can do whatever you want, and you can do it to a pretty, like, I guess that would be a follow-up question is why, and I think you talked about this a lot in your TED talk as well. You're like, people are unhappy, but not unhappy necessarily to an extent to make a change. And people are happy, but not necessarily happy enough to like push it in.
Man.
Right?
Yep.
But
Spot on. Very well said.
thank you very much.
Yeah.
I feel that is probably like one of the truest statements like I've ever heard. Like I kind of have that corporate background, and um, I reckon maybe 90% of the people I work with are just like, yeah, I don't really like the job, but like I'm not really gonna like any job that I kind of get. So like at least I know like the bounds of this one and like the team and like whatever. So I'm just gonna stay here because it's easier than like the unknown. Like what? Why do we like? What I guess like why do we? Is the question why do we do that, or how do we snap out of that, or how do we get other people to snap out of that? Is probably more my question.
Yeah. It's the complacency act. That complacency
Yeah.
kills.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's you said it word for word. That's exactly what I said in my TED talk, and it blows my mind. And that's why I say when I use examples of people who have done tremendous things, like the people who have changed the world, a lot of times it's because they've gone through something tragic. Okay, and if you look at that baseline people, that 70% or 80% that are not happy enough or just happy enough, that complacency act, man, this is what makes up the vast majority of our population. And to them, they might be the people that motivation comes and goes, or they're just going to sit here and take crap from their boss and live in this state because they've prioritized certain things. And to them, maybe complacency and consistency and certain things is important because of the way they were brought up, or because of the choices they've made, because of the relationships that's happened, whatever, right? Every single buddy has their own individual person, or is their own individual person because of the things that they've endured in life.
Mm-hmm.
My challenge to those people is that when you start to step outside and see the potential, see what's actually out there by listening to somebody like David Goggins or reading a book or Wim Hof or whatever it may be, it's got to be something that intrigues you to be like, man, I wonder what it would be like, right?
Yeah.
And what happens is when people can recognize that and hopefully listen to this talk and understand that we can achieve anything we want, it's a conscious decision away. And my whole TED talk is based on making a conscious decision and knowing that we have the power to put ourselves in the have to state proactively, not needing tragedy or something catastrophic to do it, to take action, to use the things that we've talked about, to get a little taste, like an appetizer of what life could be like. Those are the people that when they get it, they can't stop.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden they just boom, take off and travel in the world, and they're seeing things in a whole new light. And I encourage people to do it. There's one thing that I talk about in my program, and I'll give you a brief insight, is every single day we do our certain things. Okay, we take action, calls to action is what I call them. Get up, go to work, do our thing, right? And every single day we test what I call is the confidence reflex. So it's basically a line of our comfort zone. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe once in a while we're going to venture out into our comfort zone and get outside of it, and we get stung or we get bit, or we're like, man, forget this, I don't want to do that again. And we kind of go back into this huge cycle. So we're just repeating over and over and over, and we're making that stronger and stronger and stronger. When you get a mindset coach or a nutrition coach or a personal trainer or whatever it may be, they're going to test that confidence reflex, that threshold, and they're going to basically explore past it. And I use a theory called bend, break, and forge. And as soon as you break through, bend that confidence line, break that habit entirely, forge a new one, your confidence threshold just doubled, because your overall cycle now becomes twice the size, because you've proven to yourself that you can step outside your comfort zone and become successful and become a better version of yourself. And when people make that conscious decision and actually do it, those are the people that really can ultimately change their life in a matter of 1 minute by making a decision and then taking action on it. And when they start, most of them can't stop. I mean, controllable is always, and balance is very important. Otherwise you end up like Goggins. But I think it's very beneficial, very healthy to constantly challenge that confidence reflex every single day.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good way to put it. It's, yeah, I guess I think it's frustrating. I think sometimes when, and I guess it's kind of like when you watch the hockey game, like to use an example we kind of used before, is when you see like, you can see potential in others, and it's like, there's nothing you can do to try to like get them to see it in themselves.
Yeah, so it's like you want to like grab them and shake them really hard, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Hopefully that's not just me.
Awesome. All right. Well, mate, where can people find you? Do you want to give us a bit of an overview into what working with you looks like? What kind of the program entails? Where can people find you? Where can they get in touch?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So Vancity Brett everywhere on Instagram is where I'm mainly as well. On my website, vancitybrett.com. I only do like an all-inclusive package. So it's not like you can pay by the hour because, as I said earlier,
Yeah.
mindset coaching is all day. It's a constant thing. So yeah, it's an all-inclusive package, and it's just like, let's just go, and we assess it month by month. Um, yeah, it's definitely a lot different than any type of training and coaching you'd ever have, because when you're dealing with the mind, it doesn't turn off. It's not like you can come to me for 1 hour detox and that's it. No. It doesn't work like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you, mate.
Cool.
Nice
Hey
to
man, it was a
finally
pleasure, man.
chat.
Absolute pleasure.
And
Yeah,
we'll have to do this again soon, mate.
totally, man.
Hopefully
It
the
was
next
great.
one, hopefully in person. Hopefully it's not too long before borders
Yeah,
open up, and
no
yeah,
kidding.
easy.
I greatly appreciate it, man. Thank you so
Thank
much
you
for the
so much, mate.
opportunity.
Cheers.
All right, man. All the best.